This year's general election, registered voters need to watch for their ballots arriving by mail in mid-October. Following the instructions, seal your ballot in the envelope provided and be sure to sign the back.
Envelopes without your signature will not be accepted.
Look for your free elections guide in the newspaper or at locations statewide. There are no polling places, so be sure to drop off your ballot at a place of deposit.
Hawaii votes by mail.
My mic is muted. There we go.
Okay.
Everyone, Spotlight. Welcome to Spotlight Hawaii. I'm Ryan Kalesuji, joined by Yanji Denise, and of course, it is November 2nd, the day before the elections. This is a conversation, of course, brought to you by the Office of Election. Yanji, we've been talking about the election for many months now. Hard to believe it's only a day away.
Yes, and I don't know about you, but I've got so much anxiety about what's going to happen. I'm so curious. So, of course, we will be talking. We're very excited. Post-election, we've invited the person who is going to be the mayor-elect from Hawaii County, along with the city and county of Honolulu. We'll be talking to those folks. We don't know who it's going to be yet, but we've set aside time for the people who will be taking those positions. But of course, this morning we want to start off our week talking to someone who does hold office and will continue to do so, and that is Governor David Ige. He is here to talk to us about a number of issues. Governor, good morning. Thank you for being with us today. Let's start off with something that's been getting a lot of attention, and that is this mask mandate proposal, the idea that we would change the way mask mandating is enforced. Can you talk a little bit about what your office is looking at and what the state is hoping to do?
Yes, thanks, Yanji and Ryan, for having me on again. I really do appreciate this opportunity. What we're talking about, let's be very clear. The mask mandate is the law right now. You know, the state, I issued my emergency proclamation requiring masks, and every mayor has issued a mandate requiring masks. So it is the law, and people need to comply. What we're talking about is that right now, under emergency proclamations, the only penalty that we can use to encourage people to comply is a misdemeanor with a fine. And what happens is that makes it a criminal penalty, and that those who want to contest the citation is entitled to a jury trial. So what we're talking about is creating a different way so that we can assess a fine simply, just like a traffic citation, so that we would be able to just assess the fine, and people would have the option of paying it or, contesting the fine, but it wouldn't require a jury trial, which a misdemeanor does.
So is that something that you think could really cause the legislature to come back for a special session, or is that something that would realistically have to wait till January once session resumes?
Yeah, it's clear, Ryan, that it does require me passing a law. We tried to see if I could do it in my emergency proclamation. The feeling is that we don't have that option right now. So we'd have to pass a law, and we definitely would do it next session. The question is whether we want to try and accelerate that timetable and call the legislature back. You know, with us being so close to the election and really the end of the year, we would be inclined to wait till next session. We definitely want that option to just assess a fine rather than the only penalty being a misdemeanor.
So if you did wait until the legislature is in session, which is mid-January, how fast could that bill actually, if you did an acceleration process, how fast could that actually become the law?
The bigger challenge is just about all the logistics that would be involved with, implementing a process for citations and all of that. The law itself could actually probably be passed in a month, maybe 4 weeks. If both the House and the Senate would agree. And I think in our conversations they do. Both the Senate President and Speaker believes that we should have another option, the ability to assess a fine. So we'll see. We're debating whether that makes sense right now. It would require pretty complicated legislation, and clearly trying to get that rushed through in an abbreviated session is just a hard thing to work through.
Let's switch gears here, talk about the Safe Travel Program. Of course, it's been a few weeks now that Trans-Pacific travel has been allowed back into the state. Your thoughts on these first few weeks, things you've learned and the things that you're noticing and seeing with those coming and entering Hawaii?
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. I think that the program is going quite well. We've had participation actually higher than we thought. We thought we might get 2,000 to 3,000 travelers a day. We are getting 4,000 to 5,000 travelers a day coming in. So more than 100,000 since we began the program on October 15th. We did anticipate that there would be an increase in the virus activity. And we've seen, we've been encouraged because the number of COVID positive people, travelers who have come into the state, and the number of infections caused by travel has been relatively low. Most of the travel related have been residents traveling to the mainland and coming back, or traveling inter-island. Other than that, those coming from domestic U.S. has been relatively few. I think so. That's encouraging. More of the hotels are reopening. You'll see more of them in November, November 1st and November 15th, and through December, we'll begin to see more hotels reopening.
On the subject of travel, let's talk a little bit about the neighbor islands, especially as we start to enter the holiday season and people are planning travel to perhaps go see family or have family come to Oahu. Do you anticipate having a sort of statewide system that is, the same on all the islands? Because right now it seems like each county obviously is doing its own thing. What can you tell us about that?
Yanji, we have developed more trusted testing partners here on Oahu, so that those who travel to Oahu and from the neighbor islands and wanting to get back without being quarantined, they definitely will have more options. I did talk with the mayors on Friday, and it's still a concern about travel to Oahu. And even though the number of cases are down significantly, there still is a concern about someone coming to Oahu, getting infected, and bringing the virus back. And we saw what happened in Lanai. We're 2 weeks. Remember, Lanai was 0 cases for 7-8 months, pretty much up until 2 weeks ago. And within a week, Lanai went from 0 to almost 100 at this point. And I think that's the concern that I hear from all the mayors, is that it is still a travel within the state that can introduce the virus into the communities. And they want to make sure that we minimize those opportunities.
We heard from Mayor Kirk Caldwell, who spoke about potentially adding that second testing here on the island of Oahu, that we are seeing the voluntary programs on the neighbor islands as well as what's happening over on Hawaii Island. Have you had any discussions with him about the status of what that looks like? Could we see a second testing option available for those entering Oahu anytime soon?
One of the things we're working on, Ryan, is the mayor has made arrangements for a testing facility in a container. We've installed a container out by the airport, and we continue to work through all of the regulatory process to get that up and running. The container is supposed to be able to test 10,000 samples per day, and that would virtually double the entire state's testing capacity. So we're working to bring that online. If we can ramp it up to the full capacity and get 10,000 tests a day, that would really be a game changer. That would essentially more than double the local testing capacity, and we could offer post-arrival testing as well as testing for inter-island that would facilitate travel. So we continue to try and expand testing capacity on all of our islands so that we just have more options.
We want to bring in the audience. Marie Streep has more of a comment than a question, but it's something that a lot of folks are concerned about. She says, all these tourists not wearing masks are from high case areas. What is the state doing when it comes to messaging and letting the visitors know that we do indeed have a mask mandate and that they need to follow it, even if that's not the case in the place that they came from?
Yeah, certainly, Yunji. We've been working with our travel partners, the airlines, and the hotels to make sure that we can get messaging in all of those venues to remind them. You know, one of the things that we have learned since we started the testing program is that, you know, we're not clear all the time that the mask mandate is a requirement, regardless of whether you're tested or not. You know, some of the travelers have expressed that they thought that because they tested negative, they were not subject to the mask mandate. So, you know, we continue to work with hotels and airlines to tweak that message and get them on the video systems in both the hotels, as well as signage and reminders at the airport and in flight, because we know that that's really important.
I want to bring in another question. It's a lengthy one here, but asking the governor on the eviction moratorium extended, what kind of help can residents get back payments for rent and mortgage? There was a rental assistance program offered in September, which she applied for on September 29th. Since then, she's only received a confirmation email and is waiting for that. Can you just sort of maybe provide, as a broader question, what current services, programs are being made available for those like Diana who are looking for this, and an update on that rental assistance programs that we launched in September?
Yeah, certainly, Ryan. We have been working with Catholic Charities and the AUW to stand up that program. They have hired more than 150 employees collectively between Catholic Charities and AUW now to really process those applications. So they're really accelerating their ability to process applications. Appreciate everyone's patience. I did extend the eviction moratorium to the end of November, and we do anticipate extending it through the end of December, and encouraging the landlords to really work with the rental assistance programs prior to them evicting anybody. You know, we know that we have a housing challenge here in the state. We don't want to exacerbate it, and you know, we're wanting to distribute $100 million to help people with rents and mortgages to keep them in their homes.
I want to bring in this question from Michael because it's an interesting one now that we have open trans-Pacific travel. He says the CDC lifted their no-sail order for cruise ships in the U.S. waters. What restrictions, if any, does Hawaii have for cruises in the coming weeks and months? NCL is selling cruises around Hawaii starting in January. Do you anticipate having cruise ships starting to return to the islands in 2021?
I just want to remind people that the 14-day mandatory quarantine for trans-Pacific travelers does apply to cruise ships as well. So, you know, unless the current, my current orders changes, anyone coming into the state on a cruise ship would be subject to the 14-day quarantine, which means that they wouldn't be able to get off the ship and visit any place on. I am aware that the cruise industry has implemented a whole number of health and sanitation requirements. My understanding is that they'd be implementing a testing program as well on those who are participating in the cruises. So, you know, we are looking at the new CDC guidance, and we are talking with the cruise industry here in the islands so we can understand what their new testing and cleaning and sanitation requirements would be, just to ensure that those who may be coming to the islands would be virus-free and that we would not subject our community to increased infections.
You know, last week you announced the return of travel from Japan to the islands, and that testing program that is now set up for those looking to enter back into Hawaii. You did mention, however, that Hawaii residents who are looking to go to Japan, however, will still have to go through that 14-day quarantine period. Is there any sort of talk underway right now that might allow Hawaii to receive that same sort of partnership that those from Japan coming to Hawaii may be extended to those from Hawaii who would like to visit Japan?
Yeah, Brian, I do think that, and we've had pretty extensive discussions with the Japanese government. Although they didn't say it, my interpretation, we are on the eve of an election and there may be a new president. As you know, the US-Japan relationship is the most important to both Japan and the United States. And I think they're just being cautious right ahead of the election until they see what the outcome is. They've agreed that they would be willing to consider Hawaii separate from the rest of the United States. But they just want to make sure that in the government-to-government relationships, that the United States doesn't get upset about the fact that they're treating U.S. citizens from Hawaii differently than they might treat other citizens from the rest of the country.
Yanji's
sorry. I'm trying to mute it once in a while because I do have 2 children in the next room.
Yes.
This is, life in the time of COVID. But Mindy has a question. Mindy Klepper says, what's stopping our public schools from opening? Is our local government helping with CARES Act funds? I know that the superintendent is supposed to announce a plan for the next school, for 2021 sometime this month. But what can you tell us in advance of that? First, to the CARES Act funding, how much has gone to schools? And secondly, do you anticipate having more in-person learning come January and beyond?
Yes, yeah, Yunji, we've committed more than $30 million. I don't have the current tally, for both devices to facilitate distance learning, hotspots for those who don't have internet connectivity at home to be able to get those devices. I just approved another $2 million for air purifiers so that, we can, we've seen the CDC guidance and, we want to try and provide the best healthy environment. All of the complex area superintendents are working with their communities. As you know, about a month ago, we did publish the school metrics for returning to in-person learning. Clearly, Kauai County and Maui, prior to the Lanai incident, clearly had lower case counts that would allow a transition to blended learning and then in-person learning. We are putting a priority on the younger children. We want to get kindergartners, first graders, and second graders back to in-person learning. We know that the socialization is just a big part of the education. And so I think you'll begin to see schools returning blended at first, probably in transition, focused on the younger children, kindergarten, first grade, second grade as a priority, and then expanding up to the older kids.
Sort of expanding on that question about CARES Act money, we have about 2 more months to, of course, spend all the CARES Act money that was allocated to the state. Will the state be able to spend all that? And I know that you had mentioned that whatever remains would go to the Department of Labor, of course, the unemployment benefits. But where do you see that sort of right now in terms of the overall spending and how much may potentially be added into the unemployment trust?
Yeah, Ryan, we are working with all of the providers. We get a weekly report, actually daily reports back from Catholic Charities and AUW from the spending that's tied to the rental relief and mortgage relief. As you know, the Hawaii restaurant card has been distributed. We almost have 90% activation of the cards. And I've heard from restaurant owners, it's made a big difference in just the number of people coming in. And for many of them are still doing takeout, but they are seeing increased traffic for dining in services as well. So we are keeping track on a daily basis about spending in all of those big programs. So, I know that we'll spend every penny. But clearly, how much goes to unemployment insurance to help businesses broadly, we'll have to see. Hopefully, most of it. I would prefer that we provide assistance for mortgage and rental relief, for example, rather than retrieve the money. But, we are committed to making sure that everyone benefits every penny from CARES Act funds that we got.
On CARES Act spending, can you tell us a little bit more about the Business Pivot Grant Program and how businesses can apply for some of this money? Because a lot of people, of course, want to open up, especially with the holiday season approaching.
Yeah, so the Chamber of Commerce is working. I know that they are taking applications. Remember, the Pivot Grant is really trying to help businesses with both expertise and consultation about, taking activities. They also have identified contractors who would help businesses pivot, get them to increase their online presence, be able to sell more things online, to be able to implement the appropriate mitigation measures to help them succeed in business. So the Chamber of Commerce has a website. I'll get the link to that site, and it does have the application process. I've had an opportunity to talk to a number of businesses who is struggling because of COVID-19, and they certainly are encouraged to get help with all the changes they need to implement to be successful.
I want to sort of switch gears back into the safe travel program and those who are opting out and deciding to go into the 14-day quarantine. We spoke to HPD last week, and they said as many as potentially 20,000 people on Oahu decided that they were going to go into the 14-day quarantine and not do that, the pre-testing clearance in order to get to bypass the quarantine period. And right now they're saying that their enforcement is more reactive because of the sheer volume of that. Is there a better way maybe to track some of these who are in quarantine to ensure that they are in quarantine during this 14-day period?
So a couple of things, Ryan. We did stand up this digital portal, and everyone is required, whether they're in quarantine or not, to fill out the Hawaii Health Travel Form. And we are requiring them to give us a local phone number as well as where they will be doing the quarantine. As part of that, the program, and we've automated both text and email responses so that we are asking them on a daily basis to respond to how are they doing, have they become symptomatic. So even though there may be 20,000 people in quarantine, we know that the majority of them do respond to the text and the emails so that we confirm at least we're able to communicate with them. So the dashboard that we've created does show all 20,000 people in quarantine, but it also can show us those that have not responded to any kind of request so that we can reduce that 20,000. I know when I spoke with Doug Murdoch, 80% of the people are complying with quarantine, and that would let us know that, the 1,000 to 2,000 people who may not have responded at all are probably the ones that we might want to do a better job of checking up on.
I know we talked about schools briefly, but I want to bring in Shannon Alexis's question here. And it's one that a lot of working families are facing, which is, what are you doing to help parents that are required to return to work? Schools have not opened. Child care centers are at max capacity, according to CDC guidelines. School bus programs are not running. After school programs are not open. So how can parents return to work with no school, no child care, and no after school programs? This is obviously a very tough situation for many families. What can you tell us, especially as we look to perhaps a second round of CARES funding next year? Are you going to shift priorities, or is there a way to help more working families who do have to go back to work but can't because they have little ones at home?
Yanji, we did appropriate some of the CARES Act money to support families, and I just would encourage people to check back with their local provider. When we checked with childcare providers 2 weeks ago, at least several of them actually still had spaces available. And so I would just encourage those who need childcare to just check back with their providers. Yes, we do know, and that's one of the reasons why we are wanting to get back to in-person learning for those communities, especially when the virus transmission is really low. We know that we need to get back to schooling in the traditional sense of in-person because so many parents require on public schools for A+ programs and other programs that would allow them to be able to return to work. And we have encouraged all employers to be flexible with their employees, to allow them to work from home if that's possible, or at least on some kind of blended schedule, so that they would be able to support themselves, especially because so many continue to have children at home during this COVID time.
You know, this past week, of course, weekend, I should say, was Halloween. Wondering if you heard any reports about gathering sizes. I mean, what have you heard in terms of how the state responded to that? Obviously, there was a lot of call for people to maintain social distance and to not gather in these large groups. Have you heard anything about what happened over the weekend? And what are your thoughts moving forward as we now enter into this holiday season, and you know, the fact that many people are more likely to be gathering with larger family gatherings going on?
Yeah, you know, Ryan, I was encouraged by reports that I received that many parents had changed what they typically did. You know, most of them dramatically reduced activities. I know that Bishop Museum and a couple of other areas had outdoors activities that would allow for social distancing. And we do know that the natural environment outdoors disperses the virus and really reduces the infection rate tremendously. So I know that many that I've talked to did change what they did. Many decided not to go out for trick-or-treating, even though their children dressed up in costumes. And they did indoor trick-or-treating to the extent that they could. So I do want to remind everyone that, you know, we have to take personal responsibility as we revive our economy in order for us to get back to the new normal and get everyone back to work. We have to limit the spread of the virus, and that means wearing a mask whenever you interact with people, washing your hands, staying home when you're sick. All of those things we need to continue to do, and change what we do for our holidays, because in-person celebrations with tens or 20s of people are just not allowed right now. And so organizing virtual Thanksgiving celebrations and holiday celebrations would become the new norm if we want to get our economy restarted again.
Okay, well, I think that's a good note to end on. I know our time is up, so thank you so much, Governor David Ige, for joining us. We do appreciate your time here on a Monday, and
thank you so much, Yunji and Ryan. I do look forward to this opportunity to answer your questions and the public's questions, because I know how important that is. Aloha and mahalo.
All right, take care. Thanks, Governor.
Thank you. Well, interesting. So we heard sort of a different take when it comes to this mask mandate, which is something that, Ryan, you and I have been exploring with our guests who've been on here. General Harris saying that they were considering a special session. The governor saying that given how close we are to the start of the session, that it's unlikely that they will actually call a special session, but they would try to expedite a bill, which, because it's complicated, could still take a month to get through, and then who knows how long to actually implement.
Yeah, and he's also saying that it's not so much just the process of the bill passing process, it's the implementation of the programs and everything that needs to be stood up in order to accommodate sort of these new changes in policies, and how that's going to be impacted, of course, on the judicial system as well as on police and how they enforce it. So there's a lot of things to kind of work through if the state kind of moves into that direction, which sounds like mask wearing will be something that we have to get used to even after a vaccine is made available, and people throughout the state likely will have to get used to wearing a mask for a long period of time over the next potentially a year or even longer.
Yeah, that is a hard pill to swallow, but it's one that we are stuck with right now. Of course, we want to remind you that the election is tomorrow. If you still have a ballot in hand, we want to encourage you to go to a drop-off site. There are 8 across Oahu and a number of others across the state. You can check out that website right there from our sponsor of this conversation, elections.hawaii.gov, to find out where you can drop off your ballot. Do not drop it in a mailbox, because if it is not received by tomorrow, then it will not be counted. And of course, we don't want that to happen.
That's right. And on our next show on Wednesday, we'll actually be speaking to the winner of the Hawaii Island mayoral race. We know that there are two candidates that have made it out of the primary into this race, in Kaika Marzo and Mitch Roth. We will be speaking to the winner and the mayor-elect on Wednesday to get their thoughts on, his thoughts, I should say, about the election process and how they plan to move Hawaii Island forward during COVID-19 as well.
That's right. And then Friday, we've got Donnie Dawson from the film industry. And in the weeks ahead, I saw a number of unemployment questions. We've invited Ann Pereira-Stacquio to come back. So she'll be coming back in the weeks ahead, along with a number of other guests. So we have some good conversations in store for you for the month of November. Of course, we're all going to be glued to our televisions and Twitter and whatnot ahead of the election. And tomorrow is going to be a nail biter of a day, I think, Ryan.
That's right. And for coverage, make sure you stay connected here to the platforms of the Honolulu Star-Advertisers, as we will be providing updates throughout the day in local and national coverage. We will see you right back here on Wednesday for another Spotlight Hawaii. Aloha.
Aloha.
For this year's general election, registered voters need to watch for their ballots arriving by mail in mid-October. Following the instructions, seal your ballot in the envelope provided and be sure to sign the back.
Envelopes without your signature will not be accepted.
Look for your free elections guide in the newspaper or at locations statewide. There are no polling places, so be sure to drop off your ballot at a place of deposit.
Hawaii votes by mail.